A vast majority of the countries in the world are newly formed nations. Take the countries in Southeast Asia, for example. There are 11 countries in the region, including Malaysia. We have a shared history which predates the formation of modern countries, indigenous groups of people as the first settlers, and ancient kingdoms. And most of us were colonized before gaining our independence. The recent intrusion by the self-proclaimed Sultan of Sulu forces in Lahad Datu, Sabah, incurred casualties on both sides. For Malaysia, the territorial claims of the former Sultan descendants are intolerable. The claimants argue that the Sultanate's territory had been ceded only to Britain, with no agreement on incorporation into Malaysia. Sabah, the former North Borneo, became a British protectorate from the late 19th century until it became a crown colony. It gained a brief period of independence before becoming part of the Malaysian Federation in 1963. By then, the Cobalt Commission determined that the majority of people in Sabah and Sarawak favoured the formation of Malaysia. The former Sultan's descendants did not reclaim their territory, but instead agreed to continue accepting the payment under the previous arrangement. Efforts by Malaysia to resolve the standoff in Lahad Datu without bloodshed failed, as the Sulu intruders had launched an attack on Malaysian security personnel. In response, on March 5, 2013, the Malaysian Armed Forces and the police launched a joint operation to dislodge the intruders from Kampung Tanduo in Lahad Datu. The debate over the intrusion continues. How legitimate is Sulu's claim on Sabah? Join us as we seek the answers on Viewpoints at 7.
Do you think this will put some Malaysians at the crossroad in terms of deciding what is best for the country? What did you see wrong when you talked to many people lately and empathize with them in terms of their rights and their needs? What differences can we draw from the government's well-being of Rakyat and also continued progress of the nation politically, economically and socially?
Hello, welcome to Viewpoints at 7. On the show tonight, we ask the question, how legitimate is Sulu's claim to Sabah? With our guest, Dr. Farish A. Noor, Associate Professor, S. Rajaratnam School of International Studies, Singapore. Welcome to the show, Doctor.
Thank you for having me.
Perhaps, Doctor, we could start with some historical background of the Philippines' initial claim to Sabah.
Well, if I may, I'd like to begin by addressing the vocabulary, the way that we pose these questions. Let us remember that Sabah was an independent state in 1962, and it became part of Malaysia together with Sarawak and the Federation of Malaya in 1963. So we have to address this as a claim on Malaysia. Sabah is Malaysia. Sabah is not just a part of Malaysia, Sabah is Malaysia. That's one thing. The second thing is, of course, of the issue of the Suluk's presence in Malaysia, which is something that has a long history to it. The Suluk community, along with Bugis, Malays, Chinese, Indians, Arabs, have lived in this part of Malaysia, Sabah, for hundreds of years, and that has never been a problem. The root of the problem here is a claim being made on a part of Malaysia by someone who happens to be the citizen of another country. So I think that's how we should approach the problem. Our vocabulary is important at this stage. Mm-hmm. So the nature of this claim is an old, long-standing claim, and it is really a part of the very convoluted history of our entire region of Southeast Asia, where we have communities who cross boundaries and who existed before the creation of nation states. So what's happening now really is an individual who claims an ancestral right to a part of another country. Mm-hmm. And while one does not dismiss history, I think we have to remember that post 1950s, 1960s, we live in an era of nation states. Mm-hmm. And I think with the creation of ASEAN in 1967, all the countries of ASEAN have accepted that our boundaries, as they are now, historical though they may be, mm-hmm. are set. And I think that's why this has turned into a problem that may have diplomatic repercussions.
But when we talk about the Sabah claim, Doctor, what is the difference between the stand by the Philippines government today versus the one held by the self-proclaimed Sulu Sultanate? Does Jamalul Kiram III have a legitimate case of claim?
Well, let's look at the stand taken by the Philippine government, the Philippine state itself. Post-confrontasi, and certainly with the creation of ASEAN, all the countries of Southeast Asia, ASEAN, the founding nations, have decided that we live, whether we like it or not, with the nation state as the dominant paradigm in international relations, in our multilateral relations with one another. So a lot of these claims, the claims made by Indonesia, for instance, have basically been put to rest. That's done because we understand that as part of Southeast Asia, as part of ASEAN, we need to move together. And we need to lay to rest once and for all these claims that predate the creation of our nation states. Now, as for the claim of this particular individual, the problem lies in the fact that the Sultanate of Sulu today is not really a political entity with any power. It is largely symbolic. In the same way that in Indonesia, you still have the old kingdoms of Cirebon, Surakarta, Yogyakarta. They exist, but in a sort of symbolic historical sense. These are not states within states. So for an individual who happens to be a Philippine citizen to make a unilateral claim to another part of Southeast Asia, there are two claims being made here. A claim on the territory of another ASEAN country, but also the claim that this individual has the power to proclaim himself king within a republic. So it's a very complicated legal problem here. But as far as I understand, the Philippine Republic is precisely that. It's a republic with equal citizens, without states within states. So this is really a problem, a legal problem, a constitutional problem that affects the Philippines primarily. And I think the Sultanate of Sulu is not a political entity. It is not a separate state from the Philippines.
But Doctor, in this modern age, does it make sense for any group or even any country to dig out old historical documents and then make claims of ownership, whether through peaceful or violent means? Well,
let's distinguish the individual concern, the so-called Sultan Kiram, and the Suluk people. I think Malaysians and the Malaysian state does not have a problem with the fact that for hundreds of years, people from Sulu Islands have lived in Malaysia. Many of them have become Malaysian citizens because they were there even before the creation of Malaysia. And they were immediately nationalized as Malaysian citizens.
And their loyalties to this country.
Of course. And they are Malaysians. They are Malaysians too. So I think that's not the issue. The issue here, of course, is someone who can pick up a legal document and claim that on the basis of history, he has a claim that predates the creation of the states. Now, of course, this is not unique to Sulu. Across Southeast Asia, we have people making claims like this that impinge on other nationalities.
Yeah.
But I think in the context of today, again, like I said, for all its flaws and weaknesses, the nation state is the only thing we have. And no nation state would tolerate this. In the same way that the Philippines would not tolerate a Malaysian saying, I have a document that says, I'm the king of Manila. I cannot go through my archives, find a letter which somehow proves that I am the descendant of the British royal family, and then fly to London and claim to be the king of the English. I don't think any state in the world would tolerate this, and neither would the Philippines. And this is what President Aquino himself has said to the Philippine people. If this were to happen to the Philippines, the Filipinos would quite likely reject such a claim too. So we are living in the 21st century. We are living with the nation state as the only tool we have to handle bilateral, multilateral negotiations. And the nation state, unfortunately, can only deal with other states. We cannot entertain the demands of non-state actors. And that is precisely what Kiram is. He is a non-state actor, which is why also we do not blame the Philippines for this.
So we are not dealing with the state now. We are dealing with an individual.
Yes. And in fact, our dealings with the Philippine state have been very cordial.
Yeah.
Our diplomatic relations with all countries in ASEAN, with Singapore, with Indonesia, with Thailand, and of course with the Philippines, are actually at a very high note at the moment. And I think we ought to be grateful to the Philippines for being very responsible so far.
All right, Doctor. We are taking a short break. We will be back in a moment. Stay with us. Thank you for staying with us. Doctor, The Sultanate of Sulu's lineage has been in dispute ever since Sultan Jamalul Kiram II died in 1936. Is it not too late for the present self-proclaimed Sultan Jamalul Kiram III to make his case? And the question is, why now?
Well, again, this is an internal Philippine question. Because again, for Kiram to make his claim now, he seeks legitimacy not only from the international community, but primarily from his own people, from the Philippine government itself. And it's really something that the Philippine government has to deal with. This is not unique because we see in many other parts of Southeast Asia, for example, in Indonesia, certain Javanese royal families have fragmented, with many people claiming to be the rightful heir to the Sultanate of Surakarta, for instance. But the question again is this: even if there is a recognition that he is the legitimate claimant to the status of Sultan, the Sultanate of Sulu, as a political entity, does not have standing within the context of the Philippine Republic. It is not a state within a state. It cannot, for example, print its own currency. It cannot have bilateral relations, formal bilateral relations with other states, in the same way that Malaysia or Singapore or Philippines would not have bilateral relations with the kingdoms of Java, because these are not separate states.
Yeah.
So I think this is a very complex issue, which is primarily an internal contestation for politics within Philippine society.
This guy even has his own band of army.
Yes, well, that again is a problem. As I said, there are separate kingdoms in Indonesia, but without private armies of their own. And I think here it is important to note that within the context of the Philippine Constitution, as pointed out by the President of the Philippines himself, no Philippine citizen, and that's what Kiram is, he is a Philippine citizen, no Philippine citizen has the right to have a private army. No Filipino has the right to bear arms without licenses, and certainly no Filipino has the right to declare war on another country. So the legal standing of this entire case is extremely dubious. And why is it coming now? Well, I think we also must understand that Philippines is about to head to elections soon, by May. And I think this has been alluded to many Philippine analysts, who are suggesting that perhaps this is part and parcel of a broader political campaign, people contesting for power, and perhaps the opponents of President Aquino trying to weaken him and trying to make him look bad as he gets closer and closer to the elections.
Yeah. The problem is both countries now are preparing for election. So this is a good time for Kiram to make his move.
Yes, I say that, the timing, particularly in the context of Philippines, is not accidental. A claim like this could have been made last year, 2 years ago. The fact that it's coming within months of the Philippine elections in May, I think, does lend some weight to President Aquino's claim that perhaps this is part and parcel of a political campaign. Remember, Kiram also ran for office in the Philippines and lost. So this is a man who, on the one hand, wants to be a Philippine politician and at the same time a king of Malaysia. And I think that is...
And he was aligned to former President
Arroyo. Yes.
Yeah. But Doctor, looking at the Malaysian side of things, what arguments can Malaysia put forth to support our stand that Sabah rightfully belongs to Malaysia?
Well, Sabah, let us rephrase that in I think, a better way. Sabah is Malaysia. Sabah doesn't belong to Malaysia. Sabah is one of the actors that made Malaysia. Malaysia only came about because 3 sovereign entities, the Federation of Malaya, the State of Sarawak, and the State of Sabah, 3 independent states came together to create a federation. In that sense, we are like the United States of America with a federal government. These states have united to form a federation. So Sabah doesn't belong to Malaysia. Sabah is Malaysia. Sabah is Malaysia. That's one. Secondly, as far as the claim is concerned, well, I think the behavior of citizens of Sabah, Sarawak, like citizens of Selangor, Johor, Kelantan, Kedah, show that they are supportive of the Malaysian project. Because every time Sabahans vote, every time Sabahans pay their taxes, that tells you that they are Malaysian. They are Malaysian. Now, if, for instance, over the last a dozen or so elections, no one in Sabah has voted, Sabahans don't pay their taxes, that would suggest that Sabahans don't believe in Malaysia. But Sabahans do. They are Malaysians. They are Malaysians.
If we look at the Lahad Datu intrusion, Dr. Farish, Was it a legitimate case which can be pursued at the International Court of Justice since the intruders were not representing the Philippines government?
Well, this was a unilateral intrusion on the part of a small number of people. We do not blame the Philippines. And I think even the international community, the ASEAN region, none of the countries of ASEAN would blame the Philippine government for this. We know for a fact that the Philippine government did not send them. Now, in case of taking this matter to court, I think unfortunately this has first of all started on very dubious legal grounds. Secondly, the fact that they perform an incursion into Malaysia with guns has robbed them of legitimacy in the eyes of the international community. If it's sympathy that they wanted, I think this was actually a devastating own goal as far as a public relations exercise is concerned. Yes, they have internationalized the issue because the matter is now being reported everywhere.
Yeah.
But I think no state on the planet, on this planet of ours, would accept people coming into your territory without proper immigration, without documentation, and with weapons. So it will be very hard to actually win a case in the court of international opinion. So I think they've actually done a disservice to themselves. And I think they've also damaged, the good standing of thousands of Suluks who are Malaysian citizens too. We do not want this to lead to a state of distrust among fellow Malaysians. Suluks of Sabah are Malaysians, and they've been Malaysians for the last 40, 50, 60 years. And we should see it as that. When something like this happens that involves an external actor, of course, we do not want repercussions within. I'm actually quite happy that by and large, Malaysians, thankfully, have not behaved in an irrational manner. It would be completely wrong for us to blame Malaysian citizens of Suluk origin for something that they had nothing to do with.
All right. Doctor, we are going for another quick break. Don't go away. Stay with us on Viewpoints at 7. Welcome back. Our guest is Dr. Farish Eno, and we are asking the question, how legitimate is Sulu's claim to Sabah? Doctor, we see that in the southern Philippines, there are basically three groups. One is MNLF, the other one is MILF, which is the biggest among the three. And finally, the group aligned to the self-proclaimed Sultan Jamaaruh Kilam III of Sulu. Now, in terms of ethnicity and also the hallmark of their struggle, what is the difference?
Well, let's remember that Philippine society is a very complex society as well. All the countries of Southeast Asia are complex. And when we look at this region from Mindanao to the Palawan and Sulu Islands, there are at least 13 major ethnic groups with many sub-ethnic groups as well. Now, the rise of southern Philippine political consciousness was perhaps the result of a long historical inheritance going back to the Spanish and American colonial eras. These groups have emerged for a number of reasons, the demand for political autonomy, the demand for self-government, the demand for respect and representation at the national political level. But by and large, the groups are basically representing the various ethnic communities. These groups are not necessarily united. Not necessarily united. But of course, today, the most dominant group is the Moro Islamic Liberation Front, MILF, which is basically the strongest, the one with the largest number of men, followers, supporters, and firepower. And it was this group that Manila decided to negotiate with in order to bring about the recent peace accord that happened late last year.
And they have made it very clear that they are not involved, they are not supporting what the Jamaaruh Kilam has been doing.
Yes, precisely, because I think all these groups in southern Philippines want peace, and it is in the interest of the rest of ASEAN. In terms of interstate relations, ASEAN has succeeded in preventing war between states. That has been a great achievement for ASEAN. But we've not succeeded in bringing peace within individual states. We have pockets of violence, as we see now in southern Thailand as well. So it is in the interest of ASEAN. Malaysia has played a role to bring about this peace accord. Indonesia has also intervened in, say, Cambodia and Vietnam, because all ASEAN states want peace within. Now, of course, it's important to engage with the MILF, because it is the key player. But I think as a result of some other groups that felt that they were not represented in the peace negotiations. I mean, this may be one of the factors that has contributed to this flare-up of violence. These are basically groups who feel they have been marginalized, and would like to make their demands. Unfortunately, the method chosen in this case, which is to use violence against the Philippine state and against another ASEAN country, has created this security problem that we have now.
And that does not go down well with the spirit of ASEAN.
It doesn't go down, and it doesn't go down with the people of southern Philippines too.
Yeah.
I mean, for heaven's sakes, these people have lived through conflict since the 70s. It is time that normality is restored.
The Kiram family could not have financed the operation into Lahad Datu. Jamalul Kiram III himself is receiving financial support from the Philippines government for his dialysis treatment. Where do you think the funding for the intrusion in Lahad Datu came from?
Well, as far as these allegations are concerned, we know that an investigation has begun in the Philippines. And I think we ought to allow the Philippine authorities to allow the law to take its course, allow the investigation to continue. It seems, the picture we are getting now from Manila, from the Philippines, seems to suggest a somewhat complicated alliance of interests. Northern Philippine politicians who are opposed to President Aquino, including some former presidents, certain senators, and different groups that do not just include the group led by Kiram, but also other actors such as the MNLF. So it's actually a complicated network, which may have international linkages as well. We don't know. But I think for now, let us not fall into the trap of too many conspiracy theories. There is an investigation going on, and let us see how it develops, because it is in the interest of the Philippines to resolve this. The Philippines does not want to give the impression that it is a country that cannot control its own population. So it is in the interest of the Philippine government to conduct this investigation as clearly and objectively and transparently as possible. And I think we should pay close attention to what's happening over there.
And Doctor, recently we saw Malaysia brokered talks with the Moro Islamic Liberation Front, MILF, which culminated into a peace deal signed by the Philippines government and MILF in October 2012. What effect would this claim on Sabah by Jamalul Kiram III have on bilateral relationship between the Philippines and Malaysia?
Well, again, it's a claim on Malaysia. It's not just a claim on Sabah, it's a claim on Malaysia. The effect, I think, as far as the governments of ASEAN are concerned, if this situation had happened to Indonesia, I think the Indonesians or the Thais or the Singaporeans would take a very similar position to us. States can only react with states, because states abide by certain norms of international conduct. States do not simply walk into other states. For example, when Iraq walked into Kuwait, the entire international community rejected this, because states are expected to behave responsibly. The problem again is, we have a non-state actor, a non-state actor. But I think as far as our bilateral relations are concerned, our bilateral relations are actually very good. And it is in our interest to support the Philippines in the same way that it is in the interest of all ASEAN countries to support each other. Like it or not, this is our common shared history, our overlapping history, and our destiny as well. ASEAN has to rely on itself. I'm very grateful for one thing though. Hamdan, you alluded earlier to the coming elections. There are coming elections in Malaysia as well. Now, as we know, nothing is better as a vote winner than nationalism. The government of the Philippines could have taken a different line and supported this claim and said, now Filipinos, let us rally together against Malaysia.
President Aquino has been very supportive of Malaysia right from the beginning.
At the beginning. And from the beginning, I think both governments have been responsible. Both governments could have manipulated this matter to raise public expectations and anger and to fan the flames of hyper-nationalism. I think the fact that both governments did not do that is actually a good sign that ASEAN has reached a certain level of maturity. Our states, after 46 years of working, cooperating together, have realized that we share a common destiny. I believe that in the end, I hope this will be a learning experience for Malaysians and Filipinos and all ASEAN citizens. Like it or not, we are part of the same region. Our histories are intertwined. We should have closer people-to-people, state-to-state integration, but not like this. Not through incursions or making demands at the point of a bayonet or at the point of a Kalashnikov. This is something that should not be politicized here either, because the temptation to use this as a football in the game of politics is obviously there.
Yeah.
I think we should restrain ourselves from that for the simple reason that this is actually a real issue. These are people with guns. They are there. Let us focus, keep our eyes on the ball. Let us resolve this first, because its implications are manifold. It will impact on Malaysians of Suluk origin. It will impact on Suluks from southern Philippines. The issue has to be contained and resolved. But in the long run, Malaysians have to realize that this points to the fact that we are part of a fluid Southeast Asia, that we are a complex nation with many internal differences, and of course including political differences. But when it comes to defending the integrity of the Malaysian nation state that we Malaysians have put together, we are Malaysia. We are Malaysia. Malaysians, we are the things that make Malaysia. And I think this is where sometimes political differences ought to be set aside. One remembers, of course, World War II, and when Britain faced the prospect of confronting Germany, even the Labour Party and the Conservative Party got together. Because this is not the time to fight among ourselves.
Yeah, it's time to be together.
Yes.
The fact remains, Sabah is Malaysia.
Yeah, Sabah is Malaysia. Right.
On that note, thank you very much. We thank Dr. Farish Eno for being on the show. Feel free to send us your comments or suggestions to news@ntv7.com.my. Don't forget to join us next week. I'm Hamdan Amir, together with the team at Viewpoints at 7. Enjoy the rest of the weekend. Good night.